welcome to Half the Battle. Today we're going all the way back to the beginning, to 1982, as we look at one of the original members of the Justice League, the Joe team.
So meet Flash version 1. This figure was released in 1982 with all original body parts. Or some original body parts. Or no original body parts.
Yeah, this happens every time I talk about the original 1982 figures.
You see, every one of them except Scarlet shares at least some body parts, but they all came out at the same time, so they're both original and reused. Anyway, compared to most of the other guys, Flash looks more unique, thanks to the red padding on his chest, upper legs and arms. Except that he shares his entire body with Grand Slam except for the head. And even the head is shared with several other figures too. Still, the fact that he looks different from most of the others makes him one of my favorite figures from the first year. He got an update in 1983 where they gave all 82 figures swivel joints at the elbow, so that version is the better one.
I'm impressed by the level of detail they managed to put on a figure from 82.
The padding is nicely sculpted, as are his gloves and the fact his pants go over his feet. The best bit though, that's the silver lining on his chest, which gets even more detailed on the back. Very nicely done, especially for the time. When it comes to his accessories, he came with a standard helmet and visor quite a few of the 82 figures had, but his backpack and gun were more unique. He has a laser rifle that attaches to his backpack. This was cool and inventive, though it is a bit fragile, so watch out for that. He got these accessories because he's a laser trooper.
But more on that in the character section.
Overall, it's a pretty cool looking figure, especially for 1982. And it has a uniqueness to it, for a certain value of unique anyway. Hi again, Grand Slam. And that was the only figure Flash got in the original line.
There's a reason for that, but once again we'll talk about it in the character section.
He did get more figures after the original line ended, and we're gonna talk about those too. So meet Flash version 2. This figure was released in 2005 with one original body part.
And yes, the look of that figure deserves an explanation, one you'll get in the character section. I hope you packed a lunch, cause we're gonna be there for a while.
This Flash was part of a comic 3-pack that also had rock and roll and short fuse figures in it, as well as a comic book. Except for the head, which is a new sculpt, his entire body is that of the 1994 action pilot Astronaut, a 3 3/4 inch homage to the big 12-inch line.
Okay, there's not much more I can say here.
He's an astronaut. At least he looks the part, I'll give him that. Detailing is a little sparse, in line with the fact the body was an homage to the original 12-inch series. And unlike, say, most of Star Brigade, he looks like a realistic astronaut, so there's really not a lot you can place him with in your collection, unless you happen to have a Defiant or a Crusader shuttle. It is a nice sculpt.
But I don't really know what to do with him, you know what I mean?
There was a convention-exclusive Flash in 2007, but I don't have it, so I can't say much. Except that dude has gotten buff. Yeah, he uses Star Brigade Duke's torso, so compared to the original, it looks like he's been hitting the steroids like a late 80s wrestler. In 2008, Flash got the modern figure construction treatment, and so for the first time got all original body parts. Looking at it, I gotta admit, this is a very faithful looking homage to the original.
I'm really impressed here.
So much so that the fact he's a little taller than the classic Joes doesn't even bother me that much. Look at how much finer the red padding has gotten. Then again, these figures are 26 years apart, so some improvements in the sculpting process were a given. But yeah, from recreating the look, including the weapon and backpack and helmet, to just looking cool and detailed overall, I have nothing to complain about here.
Fortunately, there's one more figure to go.
Because Flash was also part of the Rise of Cobra movie line, even though he wasn't in the movie. So meet Flash version 5. This figure was released in 2009 with all original body parts.
Flash, what have they done to you?
I'd say this was the biggest departure from the character's look, but then I remembered Astronaut Flash exists. Okay, I can see what they were going for here. A modern, perhaps live-action reimagining of the original's look. I mean, it's there, sort of, with the red padding.
But something about him just rubs me the wrong way.
I think it's because, to me, this looks like a bad guy. The fact that he has a mask under his helmet isn't helping. Show this figure to somebody who knows little of G.I. Joe and ask him if this is a good guy, I'd say the odds are more than 50-50 they'd say no. Like, this is a Viper who in the middle of battle accidentally wandered over to the wrong side and just went with it. He does have the redeeming quality that he still looks pretty cool though, but he's definitely not my favorite version. No, that honor still goes to the OG, the first version of the character, followed closely by the modern version. And those were all the toys Flash ever got.
That means it's time to talk about the character, starting with the file card. Oh boy, strap yourselves in, folks.
Okay, we have to start with the elephant in the room, the name. Yes, there's a DC character called the Flash that existed before G.I. Joe, but that isn't really a problem, since Flash is a pretty generic word. I mean, that's why they call him the Flash and not just Flash.
That also means that you can have characters from different intellectual properties called Flash.
Like Flash Gordon or Flash Thompson. You couldn't call a Marvel character Batman Thompson since that isn't generic, but Flash is. Having said all that, why was there still only one Flash figure in the original line? Well, that's because Mattel were doing their own Justice League line of action figures, and they asserted their right that only they could produce action figures called Flash. See, now we're not talking about a character named Flash, but the more specific toy called Flash.
Yeah, licensing rights and copyright can get pretty damn murky.
Remind me to do a video on the glorious dumpster fire that was Jetfire one of these days. And I guess Hasbro didn't want to press the issue in this particular case.
In fact, they never pressed the issue again, since every toy that came after the original wasn't technically called Flash.
The astronaut was called Anthony Flash Cambello, using that whole it's just a nickname excuse again, same with the rise of Cobra figure, while both the modern and convention one were called Sergeant Flash.
You wouldn't think this would hold up, but it does.
Of course, Hasbro could have just avoided all this crap by not calling the original character Flash in the first place, but then again, I could see them calling him Flasher or something. Stalker and Flasher would make quite the team.
Anyway, let's put this whole name thing behind us and talk about the text of the file card, shall we?
Well, as it says in big honking letters, he's the laser rifle trooper, and he's specialized in electronics, having gone to school for it and for chemicals as well. And he's even working on his master's degree in electronic engineering at nights. Actually, looking more closely, his secondary military specialization says Electronics CBR.
That confused me a little.
My best guess is that it stands for Chemical, Biological, and Radiological, though I could be way off base there. He's an expert in handling the M16, M1911A1, and the XMLR-1A. Now, two of those are real weapons, a pistol and an automatic rifle, but that last one, the XMLR-1A, is completely made up and refers to the laser gun he came with. The acronym probably means Experimental Model Laser.
That's actually pretty clever, sneaking a toy in there amongst all the real weapons.
As for his personality, we don't get much. He's methodical and persistent and has an unshakable faith in the order of the universe.
Sounds like a great guy to have at parties.
Before we move on to the second file card, I should mention there were plans for a Flash toy in 1997 as part of the Stars and Stripes set. Hell, he's even featured on the actual freaking box art. But they couldn't find the molds for his figure, so he was scrapped. This might also be another reason why we only ever got one toy of him in the original line. Anyway, now on to version 2, the astronaut one.
It explains precisely nothing about why he's dressed as an astronaut. Real helpful.
Okay, so for the actual story, you'll have to read the comic the figure came with, though you wouldn't be able to tell that from the cover. It's issue 8, codename Sea Strike, where Flash and Breaker go along on a space shuttle mission, even though they're not trained astronauts in any way, for security as they deploy an anti-Cobra satellite. Cobra fires a missile at them, but Flash is able to divert its course by grabbing onto it and using his suit's booster.
So, that answers that question.
Honestly, it was a pretty cool issue. Anyway, the card itself mentions none of this, like I said, but it does change some things about the character. For one thing, he's no longer a laser trooper. Instead, he's a communications officer. Which is weird because, that's Breaker's function, the other guy that went to outer space. And yet, his real name and the rest of the card makes it clear this is Flash. This could be an error, or it could be them deliberately getting away from the laser trooper thing.
I'm thinking error.
Since the text itself doesn't say anything about communications. Instead, he's now basically the electronics field repair guy. It's his job on the battlefield to keep the Joe's technology running or to fix it, and he's very good at it. Sure, electronics include communication equipment, I guess, but they don't specify that here. The card further says that he'd rather use his skills in the military than being a TV repair guy. Now that I think about it, this may be a progression of the character from the first file card, as it mentioned him studying for his master's degree.
I guess he got it and then switched jobs within the team.
The modern version's file card is just a copy of the first, but both the convention and the Rise of Cobra cards sort of merge the first two, saying he's both a field repair and a laser rifle expert.
And those were the cards.
Next, there's the cartoon.
He wasn't used much.
So you do see him a bunch of times since he was in the opening credits of the first cartoons, but not really in the actual episodes themselves.
There's a few reasons for this.
For one thing, the 1982 line wasn't really being sold anymore by the time the cartoon started, that's why there's no Hawk in Season 1, so the original team got much less screen time. And for another thing, Flash was a laser trooper. In the cartoon, everybody was a damn laser trooper since they all used lasers instead of bullets, so he was a bit redundant.
Also, him being called Flash probably didn't help much.
He did play a small role in the opening miniseries The Mass Device and in the episode Operation Mind Menace alongside Airborne. That leaves us with the comics where he was featured more.
Well, in the first year anyway.
Makes sense that at the time when there was just the original team, members of said original team would be heavily featured. And he did get to go out into space, which was probably his most notable accomplishment. He was phased out as more and newer toys had to be introduced into the comic, and was relegated to desk duty along with most of the original team in issue 33. And that's about it for Flash. A couple of great to nice figures, a quagmire of copyright, and a decent comic run. And once again, an original Joe has gotten his due here on Half the Battle.
Well, I'll see you next time, everybody. And hey, why not like, share, and subscribe if that's your thing?